Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Real Life Podcast. I'm recording this straight after the Euros victory by the Lionesses, so spirits are high, but I thought I'd do the very British thing and bring them crashing right back down to earth with a slightly depressing podcast. Now, I'm going to try and make it not a depressing listen, but essentially this is going to be a hot takes special. So, being a film nut, people often spout films at you that they love and expect that because they're popular, you'll love them too. The problem is that a lot of the time when this happens, I really don't get on with the films that people are saying to me. But in a brief conversation, you don't really want to go on a 20-minute spiel to someone or just flat out look like a knob. So you tend to just say it's not your favourite and move on. You don't really get into it. However, I've gone to the effort of creating a podcast, so if I can't do it on here, then I can't do it anywhere. So in the interest of not having arguments with people and just being able to sort of lazily refer them to this episode, I thought I'd list off some of the very popular films that loads of people love that I really don't get along with. Don't be offended, it's a subjective medium and all that, but I'll do my best to make my explanations backed up enough to make my views understandable and coherent before I get a torrent of abuse from people who tell me that I'm stupid. So, without further ado, let's get into these films. We're starting off with a very big film, a very popular film. It's The Wolf of Wall Street. It was directed, of course, by Martin Scorsese, and it was written by Terence Winter, who was the writer on the 50 Cent Get Rich, Die Trying. And it depicts the life of Jordan Belfort, who is an arse. There's no other way to describe it, but he is. Mark Kermode describes this as a 3-hour orgy of greed and money and drugs and sex, and that's largely true. I don't hate it, because there is merit in it. It's a good cast, it's got strong performances, there's a great soundtrack, and visually, it is pleasing on the eye. Leo DiCaprio is sort of OTT, but he's also nuanced really well. He gives a great performance. Jonah Hill builds on the success he had with Moneyball and does a great performance with a new character in this film. It's very easy on the eye, as I say. Rodrigo Prieto makes it look sort of swish and zippy and stylish. The main problem that loads of people have with The Wolf of Wall Street is asking the question, does it glamorize the lifestyle that it depicts? And I don't think that it does, because for years there have been movies about gangsters and the mafia and mobsters, horrible people like Goodfellas, Casino. Peaky Blinders is one of my favourite shows ever, but realistically, all they do is actually just horrible. But that isn't the film's issue. The issue is the film does absolutely nothing at all to make me interested in this character. It comes down to writing and performance, I suppose, if you normally engage with a character. In this, something's missing. Scorsese and Winter don't really feel like they find a way into the character. I just find myself hating him all the way through. I was never once sort of seduced by this lifestyle or found it glamorous in any way. I just thought the character was hateful. So clearly, the glamorization of the lifestyle isn't the issue, because I didn't leave that film thinking, what a great life, wouldn't I love to live like that? That's not the point. Morally, the film isn't a problem. But the question then becomes, can you be dramatically interested? Why am I spending so much time with a character that I just detest, and there is no reason at all for me to like him whatsoever? In The Social Network, I spoke about this with Will, you end up, by the end, not necessarily siding with Mark Zuckerberg, but you can sympathise with him. If not empathise, you can sympathise, and you end up at least caring a bit about his character, which is difficult if you take it from the start of the film when he does some horrible things. The problem is, as soon as you start not caring, the film becomes an ordeal, and it's 3 hours long anyway. It's way, way, way too much. You could have lost easily another half an hour. Endless party scenes and drug taking, etc. You know, there's already loads of that in the film, so why do we need so many more ridiculous extremities that just take up too much time? Martin Scorsese spoke about how he fought to get the film down to the 3 hour mark and didn't think there was anything else that he could have got rid of, but he's wrong, because at least half an hour of that could have gone, in my opinion. You know, I don't think we need to be beaten over the head by those extra scenes being in there in order to be given a sense of their lifestyle. I just don't really see the need of it. It also doesn't help that every woman in this film is a wife, a girlfriend, or a sex worker. Just because the protagonist is a chauvinist, it doesn't mean the director and the writer have to be, and so the approach to the female characters is intensely problematic. It's an unmediated film. It feels ill-disciplined, and as I say, the hateful character, I ended up thinking, I would love him to get arrested. Can the police just come now? Because it becomes a matter of just watching the film. And you might say that's how films work. Yeah, Dom, you watch films. That's the whole point. That's why you do this, because that's why you're talking about this, because you watch films. It's not really how it works, is it? Because if you're just watching a film and being passive, you don't take it in or really enjoy it. You're doing nothing but watching. Whereas the films that you love, you will watch and take in more from. As I say, there is merit. The set pieces are fun. But in terms of the rest of the film, they feel synthetic because of where they are. You know, the scene with Leo crawling towards his car would, in a film in which I cared about the character, fit in really well, and, you know, could be surrounded by a bunch of other scenes that make that climax really tense. However, despite the fact that it on its own is a meritable sequence, it feels completely empty to me because the rest of the film is a sort of hollow shell because I'm not invested at all in the story. Technically and performance-wise, good film. It's occasionally jolly or funny, there's a couple of laughs, but it really lacks depths that the other Scorsese works have, and becomes a dull experience because of the character perspective we've been given and where it all happens and taking place. Also, Jordan Belfort really shouldn't have a cameo. That's the moment where you just go, okay, I hate you and I hate this world. Why am I watching this? Why am I wasting my time? And a trick, if predominantly blokes, because it is, tells you that this is their favourite film, their chat will be absolutely dreadful. Okay, so the next one really is 3 films. It's the Hangover franchise. It's directed by Todd Phillips, who many people will know did Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, and it's written by Scott Moore and John Lucas, who did films like Chicken Run and Four Christmases, and they're the pair that wrote Bad Moms, which is exactly the kind of comedy I despise. So as a lineup, some of Todd Phillips' work is really interesting, particularly with Joker. There's a lot to dive into there, but also some of his work is very problematic. And this is the kind of thing. There is a note I want to hit straight away because it needs to be said. Mike Tyson, no mate, no, you don't do that. You do not put those people knowingly in a film. He is a convicted rapist. It's not how it works. It's not the same as when me and Will were talking about Seven with Spacey, because the allegations hadn't come out yet. And you know, people weren't broadly aware that this horrible past was there. With Mike Tyson, people knew, and he's still in the film, and it's disgusting to look at. That's the kind of tone that these 3 films have, and it kind of feels like they all land in that same box. So, when I first watched The Hangover, I wanted to laugh much, much more than I did. Again, you have to have engagement with the characters, or they have to be at such an extreme the other way that you can only laugh at the ridiculousness of them. Heather Graham is a stripper, and her role is very, very limited. She does her best with it, but it's tricky when there's nothing to go off. The breastfeeding joke can just get out of here in the first film. I hate stuff like that. We're meant to find these characters chauvinistically entertaining, but they're not. They're just all very blokey and crass, and the adults are one-dimensional and they act like nitwits, and to me, it isn't really funny. It's not as misogynist as it could have been, to be fair to it, but it is too blokey and still misogynist a bit, so, you know, it's not a great medal for it to wear, really. It's trying to make it seem like these characters are exciting, but they just aren't. They're so one-dimensional, and the humour is very crass, and it's annoying to me. Also, the timings of the film don't make sense either, so in a structure sense, the film is problematic, because you go, okay, hang on, they've got a deadline of this to this, and how do they get from there to there in that deadline? Surely, anyway, it doesn't make sense. Then you move on to the second film, which is in Bangkok. It is the same film. It is the same film, but in Bangkok. In the first film, you know, they go to Vegas, and it's the hangover repercussions from that. In the second film, it's in Bangkok, except it is louder, it is cruder, it is swearier, and it's more full-on. It is the same film, but dialed up in all the ways that nobody really wanted it to be. dialed up. So the tiger from the first film, Mike Tyson's tiger in the first film, is in this film the monkey, and that could be the tagline for me. The tiger this time is the monkey. Because actually, it's better than what the tagline for The Hangover Part 2 is, which is, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, what happens in Bangkok is indescribable, which is quite a mouthy tagline. It doesn't really roll off the tongue, does it? Anyway, it's not even as funny as the first one, which wasn't really very funny at all. All the gags in the first film weren't original anyway. They've all been done before, and they've all been done again in this film, except more hammed, which means that in The Hangover Part 2, the jokes are not only not original for The Hangovers, but in The Hangover Part 1, the jokes that are in The Hangover 2 and Hangover Part 1 are not original at all for The Hangover anyway. So the whole thing feels like a waste of time, and the second film is racist. Everyone in the country is basically a figure of abuse. They're either a transvestite or they're just a figure that people poke fun at. And there's a homophobic tone running through the whole thing, which I hate. And just because a monkey is biting someone's appendage, that doesn't make it then funny. I went into Hangover Part 2 with an open mind after the first one, thinking, wouldn't it be nice if it was funny? Wouldn't it be great if, they'd learned from the first film and changed it round, and this time they created, a similar scenario, but in a way which could be explored in a more funny, kind of jovial way. But then I just found it horrible again. And again, women are just not a thing in this film, and if they are, they're there to be laughed at or ogled at in some horrible sort of male fantasy way. The third film is I call it the monetary reuniting after the first two, because of the amount of money that those two made, upsettingly to me. But that's a way with these big Hollywood comedies, as they always end up making more money than they should, because people see Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro and Bad Grandpa and think, yeah, this will be great, let's go and see that. They wouldn't do a film unless it was funny. Well, it turns out that they would. It's the least funny one of the lot, The Hangover Part 3. However, at least the storyline is built in some way. There's a series of events which correctly lead to the outcome of what actually happens. Oh, and by the way, there was a lawsuit after the second film about the ownership of the tattoo, and that means the best ever laser removal surgery has occurred, and it's completely disappeared. Anyway, I hate it probably the least of the three. But the reason that I don't like the third one is because it feels like the director was trying to make something else. It feels like it wants to be an action movie. And good on them for trying to alter the genre. I've got no problem with genre hopping. Someone like David Fincher has proven that can be done very successfully. Except the problem is, as far as action films go, which is the film the director clearly wants to be making, it's so boring. The trailer is absolutely every bit of information that you need to see. It has the giraffe and all that kind of stuff, so whatever. All the quote-unquote standout funny bits are in the trailer. Every now and again they throw in the humour from the first two films. It's less racist, it's less misogynist, it's less outlandish, the third one, but it's so dreary, the third film, which means that as a trilogy, it works about as well as, getting COVID for the third time. You don't want it to happen. Apparently, in the build-up to the film, critics were told that there's a very, very funny moment in the credits, which basically sounds like this. Film critics, look at this! What? Yeah. No. I hated the amount of money these films made, but as I say, that's the Bradley Cooper effect. People will fall for anything if you give it enough money and enough aesthetically pleasing actors and actresses in it. That's the same problem that Jurassic World had. Jurassic World actually isn't on the list of films that I've compiled here, but now that I've mentioned it, because I don't want to talk about The Hangover for any more time, I'm going to. And this will be much more brief than the other ones, but I know that there's a strong fandom for the Jurassic World franchise. People liked whatever the second one was called. People very much got on with the first one. Dominion seems to have broadly fallen flat on its arse, but I hate the first Jurassic World movie because they are assuming that the audience is completely stupid, because what they do is they think that if they throw enough money at the CGI... Fallen Kingdom, that's the second film's name. Sorry. Back to your regularly scheduled programming. If they think they throw enough money at the CGI and put attractive people in the roles, then you'll fall for anything. And I'm sorry, but it's garbage. The first Jurassic Park film is about a man who's getting ready to become a father. Jurassic World is about... Oh yeah, Blue the dinosaur, and they are inches away. I mean, inches away from putting subtitles on the dinosaurs, and I know it. And they were toying with it. They're like, could we? Should we make it speak? What if you can talk to the dinosaur? We could get Seth Rogen to be a dinosaur. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great? Chris Pratt could voice that and the dinosaur. No. Sorry. Anyway, I will stop ranting about the completely bland nature of the Jurassic World movies and move on to my final film in the list of films that most people love that I don't, and I think this one is going to be the one which upsets people the most. Here we go again. It's Mamma Mia. Yeah, I can hear several people crying and screaming and telling me that I should get my filthy grubby mitts off their perfect DVD. However, let me explain. It was directed by Phyllida Lloyd, who did The Iron Lady, who's clearly got a decent relationship with Meryl Streep, having to work with her on several occasions. And it was written by Katherine Johnson, who is predominantly a stage writer, which makes sense with the songs coming from the stage play into the movie. But she also did some TV work on things like Casualty, and season 9 of Biker Grove, I think, was down to her. Everyone loves ABBA. Any other answer is wrong. I don't care who you are. You're just wrong if you say that ABBA's bad. But Mamma Mia as a stage show is a show in which the songs are desperately thrown together to fit a narrative plot. And it spawns We Will Rock You the Musical with a character in it called Scaramouche Fandango, which is just cheating. It doesn't do much better getting itself onto the screen. So, here we go. Pierce Brosnan can't sing at all. I mean, not in the slightest. And Colin Firth cannot dance a step. It's such weird casting. It's A-list Hollywood stars doing pub karaoke. If these group of people were in the pub and the papers somehow caught it happening, they would have a field day in the press the next morning going, what on earth are these A-list Hollywood bozos doing, running around singing the collection of ABBA songs. When he starts to sing SOS, you let out a fat ass SOS yourself, because good God, he can't find a note. It's horrible to watch. And Meryl Streep, I was listening to Mark Kermode say this, who, by the way, had a full-on breakdown about this. I'm going to do better than that. Meryl Streep approaches the songs of ABBA like they are Shakespearean plays or Ibsen or the great texts, and she has such serious deliveries with them. And it's very over the top, and it's camp, and it's that kind of film, and it's that kind of fun. But sometimes, to me, it just feels like all the actors were coming at this from the wrong angle. And one of the biggest reasons I hate this film, and I do hate it, sort of, is because the cumulative weight of these songs coming off the screen, the songs survive, and suddenly you're going, why am I enjoying this slightly? Well, no, this is crap. Why am I having fun? Why am I going with Julie Walters singing to Stellan Skarsgård? Why is Slipping Through My Fingers suddenly an emotional scene to me, even in the slightest? I hate the fact that it does that to you. It somehow manages, throughout all the crap, to wrangle some sort of emotion out of you and try and resonate. And obviously, the reason that this film passes right through the wall is because the songs themselves are timeless. They're timeless songs. The film is absolutely terrible. The performances are beyond wooden, and the directing actually is really, really, really poor. Phyllida Lloyd has not had her best moment on this at all. The island stuff leaves a lot to be desired, and yet the whole thing reaches a sort of critical mass that has become so loved that everyone thinks it's unbreakable. The ABBA songs carry the whole film through. They are what they are, and so you can get along with them. Even when SOS is being sung badly by Pierce Brosnan, some part of your brain, when he's going, is going, wait, this is really good. Oh, no, wait a minute, it isn't. It's actually f***ing garbage. But the songs are keeping me going through this shower of dreary piddle. You don't believe anyone is anyone because it's rubbish. But people enjoyed it for whatever reason. Look, if people enjoyed it, then good. But I know why, and here's a hint. It's not the acting or the film production. everyone go, oh, but Colin Firth played the guitar. Yeah, an E chord once. Shut up. If we're going to talk about this kind of film resonating with an audience, it is purely because that people enjoy these songs, and no matter what you do to them, you will get on with them. And as such, even the nightmare of Pierce Brosnan spouting out what he does, and some of the notes that Amanda Seyfried misses completely, the completely hammed up, over-dramatic version of Winner Takes It All by Meryl Streep, you sit there and think, well, these songs are still good ABBA songs, and so there's part of me that's enjoying this. And I hate that it does that. It shouldn't vex me as much that it does, but it really does do that. As far as Here We Go Again is concerned, it is far, far better. There are sequences in it which work really, really well. The scene in Paris and all the set pieces there work fantastically to aid the story. That's a great musical number. Omid Jalili is really funny. Even if it's a small part, he sticks in the brain as a great little cameo, a really funny part. It's far more knowing than the original. It's far more sort of welcoming and self-referential. And with Richard Curtis helping with the script, obviously that's a big aid to that. But this one has an emotional punch that the first film didn't. And yet, it's still rubbish. Cher didn't need to be there, let's be honest. That was just to make over-enthusiastic people wet themselves. And the CGI is garbage. But again, the songs carry it through. The first half is way better than the second because it carries a better story and better sequences, and it's so, it has the emotional punch that the first film didn't. But the rest of it is missable. And it looks odd. It looks more confused than the first film did in terms of its cinematography. It's still better cinematography because the shots they're using are better, the techniques are better, the framing is better, the design is better, but it's still bad design. The first film was just bland and clunky and dull, but this works a bit better than that. However, to me the colours are too sharp and sometimes there's too much blockiness to it. But anyway, the result of the film is that the second one resonated much better, and I didn't hate the second one. I don't think it's very good at all, but I don't hate it. And actually, I think it was the right kind of tone that the first one should have been, because at the end of the day, this film isn't trying to win Oscars. Of course, I understand that. Of course, I'm not saying that this film is trying to be this great masterpiece of filmmaking that we all should have, held up on a pedestal. I understand what the film is trying to do, but it still made me feel like it wasn't done properly. If they'd done the first film with the emotional core and maybe the lineup of the second one, I think I would get on with it a lot better. But again, because ABBA are mint, you like the songs and they carry the film through. But let me make this very, very, very clear. You like the songs, you don't like the films. Okay, so I'm done with reviewing bad films now, but you'll be delighted to hear that I'm not done talking. Sucks to be you. I was already slightly apprehensive to do this type of podcast, but now, after Chloe Kelly's right foot, I'm even more apprehensive to do it, but here we are. I'll tell you why I was nervous to do it. Yeah, it's a podcast, Tom, you're supposed to tell us things. Anyway, it's far easier, I think, as someone who reviews films and talks about them a lot, to explain why you hate something than why you like it. And that's because it's always assumed that making it better would be easy and it was just blindingly obvious the changes that you would make. But you forget when you're critiquing a film that various things are just out of the control of the filmmakers. The best example I can think of is David Ayer only had 6 weeks to write the script for Suicide Squad. That's not enough time. That's not long enough. That isn't his fault, but it shows when you watch the film because that film is one of the biggest pieces of shit I've ever seen. I didn't put it in this list because I know far too many people who already absolutely hate it, and good on them. So from then, it brings into sort of a philosophical debate, if you will, if film criticism is important and if it's justified. After all, it's a subjective medium. If you've ever had the displeasure of reading my blog, then you'll know the tagline to that is individual opinions on a subjective medium, which is wanky and pretentious, but it still holds a point. Actually, I think criticism and film critics themselves and reviewing films is really important because you can base the success of a film on critics if their verdict is broadly coherent, because sometimes then you can tell that it's reached an emotional audience. But sometimes there's a lot of splintering, but that can also show that a film is doing its job in terms of making people think different things and take different things away from it. But also, the role of a critic is really important. I'm, by the way, obviously, Muggins here, not a film critic. I'm just a student that blabs on about films, but, I'm still talking about them, so I just thought I'd make this point broadly. Sometimes the film or TV or performance industry as a whole, including stage and art exhibitions and that kind of thing, is immensely undervalued. And often people who are critical of it point to poor examples of films as to reasons why. I was at school with someone who will remain nameless. They won't know who they are from the story. They'll have already forgotten about it. But we were walking to a lesson and he tried to persuade me that drama and theatre and performance were basically pointless, because he was a very economically minded person who was focused on efficiency and making sure things were running smoothly and being, broadly efficient, which is an understandable mindset to have. But actually on that issue, he was completely wrong, not only in the sense that a lot of money can be found in the industry, but my argument is money has to be well spent, or spent in ways which show its worth, because otherwise, his argument that economically the opportunity cost of, say, funding a big blockbuster is really high. Critics look to prompt filmmakers into creating their best work. Of course, sometimes they are just snooty and it's impossible to please them and just downright wrong with the things that they say. But their job is about prompting the best work and building reservoirs of other opinion that other filmmakers can go off and build from there. It's not only about industry survival, but it's also so audiences can see the best possible films. I also think another reason why the guy at school was wrong was because it is important to me that we as a society have outlets which express creativity and emotion rather than just business. That's why you may remember that in lockdown a few years ago, there was an ad run when the performing arts side of society was really struggling because of lack of funding and lack of performances, that, this ballerina or whatever could retrain to have a job in cyber, which is, just such a crap idea, because film and performance and art is how we as a society often look to express emotion or resonate with emotion or resonate with feeling, and it's important to have, and not only that, but critics don't just critique, they also praise what deserves praise. And the thing is, what they do basically is advisory, because fans make up so much of the opinion on a film as well, and a filmmaker isn't solely going to base their next work off the opinion of one critic or a group of critics or whatever they said. It's a mixture, but the fans are another important reference for filmmakers in their toolkit to try and process and create their best work and the most enjoyment possible for those people who've stuck with them and stuck dearly to a franchise or a series or a character. But also, it's good to have the opinion of people who've studied film and technique themselves, so that they aren't just relying on general audiences who aren't likely to make a film or understand the process of making a film. Because otherwise you only lend yourself criticism or advice from other directors, and that is a small pool in general, and means that the industry itself might not propel the way it wants to. Even though sometimes you might not get along with critics, a lot of the time you know what they're on about at least, and they do also know what they're on about, and they are important. I may well do another of these episodes, because there are far more of these type of films that I ain't a fan of that everyone else seems to be. But I also think it's important that you say why things aren't good rather than just, everything's rubbish, because anyone can do that. Like, have you seen that film? Oh no, I hate it, it's rubbish. Film critics won't just do that. Broadly, they will give reason, and if they don't, they're not a good critic. But even if you don't agree, it's usually coherent and has through thought. Anyway, the profound conclusion that I've reached from this waffle is that there is a point to this, what I'm doing now. There is a reason, and I think it's important to say that, you might go against the grain with a film, because you might just help people see something that they didn't before, or make them see a big problem. And particularly with something like the Hangover films, if enough people banded together after the first one or the second one and said, these films are incredibly racist and we don't like the homophobic through line, then that could have had a real impact in terms of changing the series and changing comedies from then on. And actually, I think that in the wake of those kind of films getting bad press, I think it has. I think our comedies have moved on from just simply, minority bashing and moved on to more stylistic and cleverer comedies. And I think that's important. So, sorry to not talk about an actual film for the last part of that. If you didn't enjoy it, fair enough, just let me know. But I just thought I'd spiel a bit on why I thought this was actually important and why I was doing this sort of podcast, even though I was a little bit nervy for it. Thank you very much for downloading this podcast. Again, schedule slightly all over the place, and I'm sorry about that, but work, etc., etc. And hopefully next week I will be back at a normal time and bring another new topic to discuss. So until then, of course, the usual, @Bajorian on Twitter, because someone nicked my name. Any feedback at all, whether you like that rambly sort of broad topic spiel at the end, or whether you prefer me just sticking to sort of analysing films as a whole, do let me know. I really appreciate anyone getting in touch about the podcast or anything like that. And it's come home. Until next week. Bye!